When Elias Morland woke up that morning, he did not know it would be one of the last days he would spend alone, not because someone was coming to visit him, not because help was on the way, but because his body, finally exhausted, had begun to betray him in small, irreversible ways. He lay still for a long time, staring at the ceiling of his bedroom. The paint had started to crack years ago, but he had never bothered to fix it. Back when he was strong, he told himself it didn't matter. Back when he believed he had time. Now every crack felt like a countdown. The room smelled faintly of dust and old wood. The curtains were half drawn, letting in a thin blade of pale morning light. It cut across the floor and stopped at the edge of his bed, as if even the sun did not want to come any closer. Elias finally moved. His hand reached out, slow and unsure, searching for the edge of the mattress. His fingers trembled slightly. Not from fear, from weakness, the kind that creeps in quietly, pretending to be nothing at first, until one day you realize it has taken control. He tried to sit up. A sharp pain climbed up his back, forcing a short breath out of his chest. He waited. That was the new routine. Wait for the pain to pass. Wait for the dizziness to settle. Wait for his body to remember how to obey him. There was a time when men waited for him, a time when his footsteps made people stand straighter, when his voice, low and calm, could end arguments before they started. Now the only sound in the room was the ticking of an old clock. Tick, tick, tick. It had belonged to his father, or maybe his grandfather. He no longer remembered. He only knew it had been with him longer than most people, longer than the children. He pushed himself upright and swung his legs over the side of the bed. His feet touched the cold floor and he winced. His balance wavered. For a moment he thought he might fall. No one would hear it if he did. That thought stayed with him longer than the dizziness. He reached for his cane, missed it, and the wooden stick clattered to the floor. The sound echoed loudly in the quiet house. Elias stared at it. Years ago, he would have snapped his fingers, and someone would have rushed forward to pick it up. A boy, a girl, one of the many who lived under his roof. Children with no parents, no place to go, no one to defend them. Back then he called it charity. Now lying on the floor, the cane just out of reach, he realized how strange it was that no one had ever returned the favor. He slowly bent down, every joint protesting, and retrieved it himself. By the time he stood upright again, he was breathing hard, and that scared him more than he wanted to admit. Elias Morland had built his life on order. That was what he liked to tell people. Order, discipline, structure. He had come to this town decades ago with nothing but a name and a reputation for efficiency. The town itself was small, forgotten by most maps. The kind of place people passed through but never stayed in unless they had nowhere else to go, which made it perfect. The old orphan house, on the edge of town, had been nearly abandoned when Elias took it over. The building was falling apart. The roof leaked. The walls were cracked. The children inside were underfed, undereducated, and invisible. To the town, it was a problem. To Elias, it was an opportunity. He convinced the local council he could fix it, turn it into something productive, teach the children discipline, give them purpose. They were relieved to hand it over. No one asked too many questions. At first, he really did clean the place up. Fresh paint, new beds, regular meals. The townsfolk praised him for it. Donations came in. His name began to carry weight. But slowly, carefully, the rules changed. The children began waking earlier. They worked longer hours. School became secondary. Rest became a privilege. Elias told them it was for their own good. Work builds character, he used to say, pacing slowly in front of them, hands behind his back. No one will give you anything in this world. You earn your place. They believed him. What choice did they have? They worked the fields. They cleaned the buildings. They repaired fences, carried supplies, sorted goods. What started as helping out turned into full days of labor. And Elias? He prospered. The small farm grew. The storage buildings expanded. Merchants began stopping by regularly. The town saw results and stopped asking questions. After all, the children were fed. They had beds. They weren't begging on the streets. And Elias made sure they never complained. Not openly. Years passed. The children grew older. Some were sent away when they became too curious. Some ran when they could. Some stayed, too broken or too afraid to imagine another life. Elias never learned their birthdays, never remembered their real names for long. They were labor, hands, tools. He told himself he was saving them from worse lives. And maybe in some twisted way he believed it. But time does not forget, and it does not forgive. Now, decades later, Elias stood alone in the same house that once buzzed with footsteps and whispered fear. The orphanage had closed years ago. Officially, it was due to funding issues. Unofficially, the town had changed. Laws changed. People asked questions. Elias sold the land, kept the money, and retired quietly. No one challenged him. No one thanked him either. The children were gone. Some had disappeared into the world. Some had changed their names. Some had never recovered. And Elias had aged. His hands, once firm and commanding, now shook when he tried to hold a cup. His eyes, once sharp enough to notice everything, struggled to read the numbers on his own medicine bottles. He moved through the house slowly, leaning on walls that no longer felt like they belonged to him. The silence followed him everywhere. In the afternoons, he sat near the window and watched strangers walk past, families, workers, children laughing. None of them looked at him. He told himself he preferred it that way. But some evenings, when the light faded and the shadows stretched across the floor, the memories came back uninvited. The faces, the voices, the way they used to lower their eyes when he entered the room. And for the first time in his life, Elias Morland felt something close to unease, because deep down, in a place he had ignored for decades, he understood a simple truth. Time had started collecting what he owed, and it always collects in full. The house had grown too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with rest, but the kind that presses against the ears and makes a man aware of his own breathing. The kind that reminds you that nothing else is moving, that nothing else is alive around you. He noticed it most in the mornings. Before opening his eyes, before shifting his weight, before even thinking, the silence greeted him. It waited for him. Some days it felt heavier than his own body. He lay still for a long moment, staring at the ceiling. The cracks above him looked deeper than they used to. Or maybe his eyes were just worse now. Either way, everything seemed older, worn, tired. When he finally tried to sit up, his body resisted. His joints protested with a dull ache, and a sharp pain shot through his lower back. He clenched his jaw and waited for it to pass. Waiting had become part of his routine. Nothing happened quickly anymore. He reached for the cane beside his bed and pulled himself upright. The room swayed slightly. He stood still until it settled. It bothered him how often that happened now. Once he had moved with certainty, purpose. He had been a man others followed without question. Now even standing felt like an effort. He shuffled toward the kitchen, his footsteps slow and uneven against the floor. The house felt larger than it used to, not because it had grown, but because it was empty. Every sound echoed. Every movement reminded him of how alone he was inside it. The kitchen looked the same as it had for years. Clean but lifeless. A cup sat on the table from the night before. He stared at it, confused for a moment, then remembered he had poured tea and forgotten to drink it. That happened more often now. He picked it up, frowned at the cold liquid, and poured it out. His hand trembled as he refilled the cup. He noticed it this time. Couldn't pretend not to. His eyes drifted toward the far corner of the room. The ledger sat there untouched, exactly where it had always been. He had avoided it for years, not because he feared it, but because he didn't see the point. The past was finished. What was done was done. At least, that was what he told himself. Still, his body moved before his thoughts could stop it. He carried the heavy book to the table and lowered himself into a chair. The cover creaked when he opened it, the pages stiff with age. Names filled the pages, dates, numbers, short notes written in his own hand. Work completed. Tasks assigned. Hours recorded. Children reduced to records. He ran a finger down one page, then another. The entries blurred together until one name caught his attention. Not because it was special. Not because it stood out. Because it didn't. Just another line. Age assignment output. No mention of the boy's face. No record of his voice. No note of how thin he'd been, or how long he'd worked without complaint. The book closed with a soft thud. His chest felt tight. He told himself, as he always had, that he had done what was necessary. That the world was cruel, and he had simply prepared them for it. That shelter and food were not free. That discipline was kindness in disguise. But the words felt weaker now. They didn't settle the way they used to. He left the house later that afternoon, leaning heavily on his cane as he stepped onto the porch. The air was thick and grey, the sky low and dull. The town had changed over the years, grown around him, moved past him. He stood there quietly, watching people pass at a distance. No one looked his way. That was when he noticed the man across the street. He stood near the corner, not moving, not pretending to be busy. Just standing there, facing the house, watching. Something about the way he stood made the old man uneasy, not aggressive, not curious, simply present. Their eyes met. The distance between them wasn't far, yet it felt stretched, heavy with something unspoken. The man didn't look away, didn't shift his weight, didn't react. For a moment, the old man thought about calling out, asking who he was, what he wanted, but the words never came. The man turned and walked away without a sound. The old man remained where he was long after the street emptied again. That night's sleep did not come easily. When it finally did, it came in pieces. He dreamed of the old building, the one he used to oversee. The air was thick with heat and dust. The sound of work filled the yard. Children moved in lines, carrying tools, lifting crates, following orders without question. He walked among them, younger, stronger. His voice carried authority then. He didn't need to raise it. They obeyed. In the dream, one boy looked up, older than he had been before, taller, stronger, not afraid. "You said it was for us," the boy said. The old man tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. "You said it would make us better." The boy stepped closer. "You never asked if we wanted it." The world around them darkened. The old man woke suddenly, gasping, his heart pounding violently against his ribs. His sheets were damp with sweat. The room was silent, empty, unchanged, but the feeling lingered. The sense that something had shifted. Days passed, and the man across the street appeared again, always at a distance, always watching. Never approaching. The old man began locking his doors earlier. He checked his windows twice before bed. He slept lightly, waking at every small sound. His hands shook more often now. His appetite faded. Some days he forgot to eat altogether. One afternoon, as he stood in the kitchen, a cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. He stared at the broken pieces, unable to move. He did not bend down to clean them. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, staring at the mess. For the first time, a thought came to him that he could not push away. If something happened to him, no one would come, no one would hear, no one would care. And somewhere deep inside he understood what that meant. The life he had built on control, on obedience, on taking without asking, had finally come full circle. Time had not forgotten him. It had only been waiting. The days began to lose their shape. Morning no longer arrived with any sense of freshness or purpose. It came quietly, slipping into the house through narrow gaps in the curtains, settling on the walls and floor without ceremony. The old man would wake slowly, not because he felt rested, but because his body refused to stay asleep any longer. His joints ached in a dull, persistent way. The kind of pain that never fully disappeared and never allowed him to forget its presence. He would lie there for several minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the shallow rhythm of his own breathing. The silence around him felt heavier than it once had, thick enough to press against his chest. There had been a time when silence meant control, when it meant order. Now it felt like absence, like something missing that would never return. When he finally sat up, it was with care. Every movement required thought now. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and waited for the dizziness to pass, gripping the edge of the mattress as though it might slide away from him. His hands were thinner than he remembered. The skin looser, veins more visible. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He stood and made his way through the house, his steps slow and uneven. The floor creaked under his weight, a sound he once would have found irritating. Now it simply reminded him that he was still here, still breathing, still capable of making noise in a place that had grown far too quiet. The house itself felt different these days. It had not changed, not really, but it no longer felt like something he owned. It felt like a structure he had been left inside of, as if time itself had moved on and forgotten to take him with it. Every room carried a stillness that unsettled him. The walls seemed to listen. The air felt watchful. He made his way into the kitchen and sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from him. There was no reason for his gaze to linger there, yet it always did. He poured himself a cup of tea and forgot about it almost immediately, only realizing minutes later when the steam had faded and the liquid had gone cold. Small lapses like this had become common. He told himself it was nothing. Age did this to people. Everyone forgot things eventually. Still, the feeling bothered him. His eyes drifted, as they often did, toward the corner where the ledger had once sat. He had moved it recently, pushing it deeper into a drawer as if distance alone could weaken its presence. He had not opened it again. He told himself there was no point. The past was finished. It could not be changed. Yet the past had a way of resurfacing when least expected. That afternoon, as he stood by the window watching the street, he felt it again. That sensation. The awareness of being seen. He did not turn immediately. He had learned by now that reacting too quickly only made the feeling worse. Instead, he stared straight ahead, his eyes unfocused, his breathing slow. Only after several seconds did he allow himself to glance toward the far end of the road. The man was there, standing where he had stood before, not moving, not pretending to be busy, just watching. The distance between them was enough that facial details were unclear, but posture told its own story. The man stood firmly, feet planted, arms relaxed at his sides. He did not look impatient. He did not look uncertain. He looked like someone who had come for a reason and was willing to wait. A chill ran through the old man's body. He tried to tell himself it was coincidence, that people were free to stand where they liked, that he was imagining connections that were not there. But something in his chest tightened all the same. When their eyes met, the feeling deepened. There was no anger in the man's gaze, no accusation, no curiosity, only recognition. The old man's heart began to pound, slow and heavy, as if struggling to keep pace with his thoughts. For a moment he considered stepping outside, asking who the man was, demanding to know what he wanted, but his legs did not move. The man remained there for several seconds more, then turned and walked away, his pace unhurried, as if he had seen exactly what he came to see. The street fell silent again. That night the old man slept poorly. His dreams were restless and sharp, filled with fragments of sound and half-formed images that refused to settle into anything clear. He found himself walking through places he had not thought about in years, places he had buried under routine and justification. In one dream he stood in the yard of the old building, the sun glaring down mercilessly. The air was thick with dust. Children moved around him, their footsteps soft, their eyes downcast. He recognized the scene immediately. He had stood there countless times before. But something was different. He noticed their faces. He had not done that before. They were thinner than he remembered. Their clothes hung loosely from their frames. Their movements were careful, restrained, as if they had learned long ago not to draw attention to themselves. One of them stopped. The boy lifted his head slowly and looked directly at him. "So you said it was necessary," the boy said. The old man tried to respond, but no sound came out. His mouth moved, but his voice was gone. "You said it would make us strong," the boy continued. The others stopped working. They turned toward him one by one, forming a quiet circle. "You never asked if we agreed," the boy said. The words echoed in the air, growing louder with each repetition. The old man felt something give way inside him. He tried to step back, but his feet would not move. The ground beneath him felt soft, unstable, as though it might collapse at any moment. He woke with a sharp gasp, his heart racing, his body soaked in sweat. The room was dark and silent, but the feeling remained. From that night on, the sense of being watched never left him. He began checking the locks repeatedly before going to bed. He closed the curtains even during the day. He flinched at sounds that once would not have caught his attention. His body continued to weaken. His hands shook more often. His appetite faded until meals became an obligation rather than a desire. Some days he realized with a dull sense of alarm that he had not eaten at all. One afternoon, while standing in the kitchen, a cup slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. The sound was sharp, final. He stared at the broken pieces, his chest rising and falling unevenly. He did not bend down to clean it. He could not. The simple act felt beyond him, and in that moment, a realization settled over him with terrible clarity. If he fell, no one would come. If he called out, no one would answer. All the years he had spent commanding others, shaping their lives, deciding what they owed him, had left him with nothing now that he needed help himself. The silence he had once enforced had returned to claim him. That night, as he sat alone at the table, staring into the dim light, the truth became impossible to ignore. Time had not forgotten him. It had been patient, and now it was close. By the time the seasons began to blur together, the man no longer remembered when silence first started to feel heavy. It had crept in slowly, like dust settling on furniture no one used anymore. At first, the quiet had felt earned. He told himself it was peace, the kind of peace a man deserved after decades of work, discipline, and building something from nothing. But now, sitting alone in the large house that once echoed with footsteps, coughing, whispers, and fear, the silence felt different. It pressed against his chest. It stayed even when he tried to sleep. The house had not changed. The walls were the same. The long hallways still smelled faintly of wood and oil, but the air felt empty in a way it never had before. There were no boys waking before dawn, no soft shuffling of bare feet, no quiet voices asking what work needed to be done that day, no eyes watching him carefully, trying to guess his mood before speaking. He told himself he liked the quiet. That was the lie he repeated every morning. His body, however, did not believe it. Each day began with stiffness. His hands shook when he reached for the cup beside his bed. Sometimes he missed it entirely and had to try again. That angered him more than pain ever could. Pain could be tolerated. Weakness could not. He had spent his life teaching others that weakness was a luxury no one could afford. There had been a time when people spoke his name carefully, not loudly, not proudly, carefully. When he walked through the yard, shoulders straight, boots firm against the ground, children would lower their heads, not because he had told them to. They simply knew better. Fear had a way of teaching faster than words ever could. He never called it cruelty. He called it order. The world, as he understood it, was divided between those who worked and those who wasted air. The children he gathered had no one, no families, no protection. They arrived thin, scared, desperate for shelter, and he gave them one. A roof, food, rules. What they gave in return was labor. Long days, short meals, no questions. To him it was fair. He used to stand at the edge of the field in the early mornings, watching them line up. Some were too young to carry heavy tools properly. Others had grown fast, their eyes already tired in ways children's eyes should never be. He did not see them as individuals. He saw them as a system that worked, a machine that ran because it had no choice. If one cried, it was ignored. If one collapsed, another took their place. If one ran, he was brought back and made an example of. That was how order survived. At least that is what he told himself. Now sitting alone at the long dining table, he stared at the empty chair across from him. The chair had once belonged to a boy who had grown fast and quiet, a boy who learned to work without speaking, a boy who never asked for more food, a boy who once stood between him and a falling beam without hesitation. The memory came uninvited. He remembered the sound of bone breaking, the way the boy had bitten down on his lip instead of screaming, the way his hands had kept working, even as blood ran down his arm. At the time, he had felt pride. Now, years later, he felt something else, something tighter. He pushed the thought away and reached for his food. His hand trembled again. The spoon clinked against the bowl. He clenched his jaw, annoyed by his own weakness, and forced himself to eat. But the food tasted like nothing. Later that evening, he tried to walk outside. The porch steps felt higher than they used to. He gripped the railing, breathing slowly, feeling the strain in his knees. Each step took effort. Each movement reminded him of something he had once mocked in others. Age. He had always believed it spared those who worked hard, that it only punished the lazy. Now he knew better. Age came for everyone. It did not care how strong you had been. It did not care how much power you once held. It took its time, and it enjoyed it. That night sleep came late. When it did, it brought memories he had buried for decades, faces he had not allowed himself to remember, small hands, thin shoulders, eyes that had once looked at him not with hate, but with something worse. Hope. He woke suddenly, heart pounding, breath short. The room was dark, the silence thick. For a moment he thought he heard footsteps in the hall, the kind he used to hear before sunrise. But there was nothing, only the sound of his own breathing. Days passed, then weeks. The world outside continued without him. The nearby town grew, roads changed. People moved on, and slowly, without anyone announcing it, he became irrelevant. The workers he once controlled were gone. The land was rented out. The accounts were handled by strangers who spoke to him politely, but without fear. No one asked for his approval anymore. No one waited for his nod. He tried to command them once. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. The man he spoke to smiled politely and continued what he was doing. That was the moment it truly began. Not the pain, not the loneliness, but the realization. He had built his life on control, and now there was nothing left to control. One afternoon, while sitting near the window, he noticed a group of children passing by outside. They laughed loudly, running without care, chasing each other across the dirt road. One of them tripped and fell. The others stopped immediately, helping him up, brushing dust from his clothes. No fear, no hesitation, no silence. The sight made his chest tighten. For the first time in decades, he felt something he did not understand at first. It was not anger, not jealousy. It was regret, but not the kind that comes with guilt. It was heavier than that. It was the realization that something essential had been missed and could never be recovered. He had taken childhoods and called it discipline. He had taken obedience and called it respect. He had taken silence and called it peace. And now in the quiet of his own old age, all of it had come back to sit beside him. That night he did not eat. He sat in his chair, staring at the wall, listening to the clock tick. Each second felt louder than the last. His body ached in places he didn't know existed. His hands rested uselessly in his lap. For the first time in his life, he wanted someone to speak to him. But there was no one left. The world he had built had served him well when he was strong. Now, as his strength faded, it offered him nothing. And deep down in a place he had spent his life ignoring, he understood something he had never allowed himself to admit. This was not bad luck. This was not fate. This was payment. And it had only just begun. The first time someone from the past returned, it did not happen loudly. There was no confrontation, no raised voice, no dramatic entrance. It happened the way real consequences always do. Quietly, without warning, and at the worst possible moment. It was late afternoon when he heard the knock. Not a strong knock, not demanding, just firm enough to be heard. He sat in his chair for a moment, unsure if he had imagined it. These days his mind played tricks on him. Sounds appeared where none existed. Faces emerged in memory without permission. He waited, listening. The knock came again. Slowly, carefully he stood. His legs protested. His balance wavered. He reached for the wall, steadying himself before moving toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the house itself resisted his movement. When he opened the door, he did not recognize the man immediately. The man was middle-aged, tall, dressed simply. His face was calm, almost neutral. But his eyes carried something old, something familiar, something that made the air between them tighten. They stood there in silence for a moment. Then the man spoke his name. Not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. The sound of it struck him harder than any shout ever could. He blinked, searching the man's face. The shape of the jaw, the set of the eyes, the way he stood, straight but guarded. It took him longer than it should have. When realization came, it hit like a slow wave of cold. The boy. Not a boy anymore, a man, but he knew. He knew immediately. One of the children. One of the quiet ones. One of the ones who never cried. The man did not smile. He did not frown. He simply looked at him, as if measuring something long overdue. "I heard you were still alive," the man said. The words were simple, but they landed with weight. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. His throat felt tight, dry. He cleared it, forcing his voice to work. "What do you want?" he finally asked. The man's eyes moved past him into the house. The empty hallway, the bare walls, the silence that filled every corner. "I wanted to see it," the man said. "The place where we grew up." There was no accusation in his tone. No bitterness. That somehow made it worse. He stepped aside without thinking, allowing the man to enter. They walked slowly through the house. The man's footsteps were steady, confident. He touched nothing, but his eyes took in everything. The long table, the narrow stairway, the corner where tools once hung. "This used to be louder," the man said quietly. He swallowed. "People leave. They always do," the man replied. "Especially when they're allowed to." They stopped near the back room, the one where work had been assigned, where punishments had been decided, where silence had been enforced. The man stood there for a long time. "You used to stand right there," he said, pointing. "You didn't move much, just watched." A memory flickered, a small figure standing still, waiting for instruction, waiting to be noticed or ignored. "You don't remember me, do you?" the man asked. He hesitated. "I remember many faces," he said carefully. The man nodded. "That's what I thought." There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. They sat down across from each other. The old man lowered himself slowly, wincing as his joints protested. The other man sat easily, his movements controlled. "Why are you here?" he asked again, softer this time. The man exhaled slowly. "Because I wanted to see if you remembered any of us, and because I wanted to see what became of you." He looked around again. "This," he said quietly, "isn't what I expected." There was a pause. "I thought you'd be surrounded by people," the man continued. "I thought you'd be important, powerful, respected." He let the words hang in the air. "But you're alone." The truth of it hit harder than any insult. The old man straightened slightly. "I built something," he said. "It lasted." The man nodded. "Yes, it did. And it took something with it." Silence filled the room again. "Do you know what stayed with me all these years?" the man asked. "Not the hunger, not the work, not even the fear." He looked directly at him. "It was the way you never looked at us as people." The words landed without drama, without anger, without volume. They did not need any of that. The old man opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came. There was nothing to say that did not sound hollow. The man stood. "I didn't come for revenge," he said. "I came to see if time had done what we couldn't." He paused at the door. "It has." And then he left. The door closed softly behind him. The house felt larger after that, emptier, the silence thicker. The old man did not move for a long time. That night sleep did not come. When it finally did, it was filled with images that would not fade. Faces, voices, the sound of footsteps behind him. The feeling of being watched. He woke before dawn, heart racing, sweat cold against his skin. For the first time, fear stayed with him after waking. Not fear of death, fear of memory. Because now the memories were no longer distant. They were sharp, personal, alive. He realized something then that he had never understood before. Punishment was not loud. It was not violent. It did not come all at once. It came slowly. It came in remembering. And it came in realizing that the people you broke went on living, while you were left behind to face what you had done alone. He sat on the edge of the bed as the morning light crept in, his hands shaking, his chest tight. For the first time in his life, he did not feel powerful. He felt exposed. And somewhere deep inside, he understood that this visit was not the end. It was the beginning of something much worse. The days after the visit did not return to normal. Nothing did. At first it was small things. Things he tried to ignore. His hands shook more than before. His legs felt weaker, as if the strength had been quietly draining out of them overnight. He told himself it was age. He told himself this was natural. But deep down he knew better. Something had shifted. The silence in the house no longer felt empty. It felt watchful, heavy, as if the walls themselves had started remembering. He began waking before dawn, his heart racing, his mouth dry. The dreams were never clear enough to describe, but the feeling remained long after he opened his eyes. A sense of being surrounded, of being seen, of standing somewhere he could not escape from. Sometimes he heard footsteps, not loud, not close, just enough to make him pause and listen. When he checked, there was never anyone there. He stopped sleeping in his bedroom after the third night. The bed felt too large, too still. He moved to the chair near the window instead, wrapping himself in a blanket like a man, trying to protect what little warmth he had left. The mirror became his enemy. Each time he passed it, he saw someone he barely recognized. His face had thinned. The skin around his eyes sagged. His hands looked fragile, almost transparent. The man staring back at him looked like someone who needed help. That thought made him angry. He had never needed help. He had been the one people depended on, the one who decided who ate and who didn't, who worked and who rested, who stayed and who left. Now he struggled to pour himself water without spilling it. One afternoon, as he sat staring out the window, he saw a figure standing at the edge of the property, a young man watching. His heart skipped. He leaned forward, squinting, trying to focus. The figure didn't move, just stood there, still as stone. He pushed himself up, breath heavy, and took a step toward the door. By the time he reached it, the figure was gone. He stood there for a long moment, gripping the doorframe, his chest tight. He did not tell himself it was imagination. He had learned too late not to dismiss what made him uncomfortable. That night the pain started. It began in his joints, dull and aching. Then it spread to his chest, slow and heavy like pressure building from the inside. He tried to breathe through it, the way he had taught others to endure pain. But this was different. This pain did not respond to will. He collapsed into the chair, gasping, sweat soaking his clothes. The room spun slightly. His vision blurred at the edges. For the first time in his life, he thought he might die alone on the floor. And the thought terrified him, not because of death, but because no one would know. He managed to survive the night, though he never knew how. When morning came, it brought no relief. His body felt foreign, weak, unreliable. He tried to stand and nearly fell. That was when the truth finally reached him, in a way he could not deny. He needed help. The realization felt like humiliation, like defeat. He had built his life on the idea that others existed to serve, not to save. And now, when he needed someone, there was no one left who owed him anything. He thought of the man who had visited, the calm voice, the steady eyes. For a brief moment he considered reaching out. The thought passed quickly. Pride, even when broken, clings hard. Days passed. His condition worsened. He ate less, slept less. His thoughts grew slower, heavier. Sometimes he found himself staring at the wall, unable to remember what he had been thinking about moments earlier. Then one afternoon the doorbell rang. The sound startled him so badly he nearly fell out of his chair. He sat frozen, staring at the door, heart pounding. It rang again. He forced himself up step by step, gripping the wall. His breath came in short bursts as he moved. When he finally opened the door, he found a woman standing there. She was older than the man who had visited before. Her hair streaked with gray, her face lined but strong. Her eyes were sharp, searching. She looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "Oh, you don't recognize me," she said. He shook his head slowly. She nodded. "I didn't think you would." She stepped inside without waiting for permission. "I was the one who cleaned the floors," she said. "The one who woke the others. The one who made sure no one fell behind." Her voice was steady, but there was something tight beneath it. "You used to say I was useful," she continued. "Not good. Not kind, useful." The word hung in the air. He tried to speak, but she raised a hand. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I heard you weren't well." She looked around the room, taking in the emptiness, the disarray, the smell of stale air. "I see time's been honest with you." He sank back into his chair, exhausted. She stood across from him, arms folded. "I came to ask you something," she said. "Do you remember any of us?" The question landed harder than anything before it. He opened his mouth. No answer came. She watched his face carefully, as if searching for something. Finally, she nodded. "That's what I thought." She turned to leave, then paused. "You know what's strange?" she said quietly. "For years I thought I'd feel better when you got old, when you couldn't scare anyone anymore." She looked back at him. "But now that I see you like this, I don't feel anything at all." And with that she left. The door closed. The sound echoed through the house. He sat there long after she was gone, staring at the place where she had stood. His chest felt hollow. His hands trembled in his lap. That night he could not sleep at all. Every sound felt close. Every shadow felt heavy. His heart raced without reason. His body ached in places that had never hurt before. He realized something terrifying as dawn approached. The people he had once controlled had moved on. But he had not. They had lives, families, futures. All he had was memory. And memory, he was learning, could be more cruel than any person. Because it never left, and it never forgave. The morning came quietly. No birds, no wind, no movement beyond the thin light slipping through the curtains. He woke already exhausted. As if sleep itself had weighed on him instead of resting him, his body felt heavier than it ever had before. Each breath came shallow, deliberate, like something that had to be remembered instead of done naturally. He tried to sit up. His arms failed him. For a moment panic flared. His chest tightened and his heartbeat stumbled. He lay there staring at the ceiling, unable to move, unable to call out. The house remained silent, indifferent. It took long minutes before he managed to roll onto his side. His joints screamed in protest. He gasped, clutching the edge of the bed, pulling himself upright inch by inch. When he finally sat, his vision swam. The room looked unfamiliar, though he had lived in it for decades. The furniture felt too large, the walls too far away. Everything looked as though it belonged to someone else now. He realized then that the house had outlived its purpose. So had he. He stayed seated for a long time, staring at the floor, gathering strength he no longer had. The memory of the woman's words returned to him uninvited. "I don't feel anything at all." That sentence had followed him through the night. Not as anger, not as sadness, but as something worse, indifference. It was then he understood the final cruelty of time. It does not punish you with pain forever. It punishes you by making you irrelevant. He rose slowly and shuffled toward the window. Outside, the day was ordinary. Sunlight fell on the empty yard. A bird perched briefly on the fence before flying off again. Life, he realized, continued easily without him. He pressed a hand against the glass, his fingers trembling. For the first time, he tried to remember their names. Not their faces, not their mistakes. Their names, but they would not come. He remembered commands, numbers, chores, punishments, but not names. That failure hit him harder than any confrontation ever had, because names meant humanity. And somewhere along the way, he had stripped that away so completely that even memory refused to give it back. His breathing grew uneven. A dull ache spread across his chest, slow and heavy. He lowered himself into the chair near the window, the same one he had been using for weeks. From there he could see the path leading away from the house. Once people had walked that path every day. Now no one did. His thoughts drifted, slow and heavy. He remembered the first child who had arrived. How small he had been, how thin. How his eyes had searched the room, afraid but hopeful. He remembered thinking, he'll learn. He remembered telling himself that fear built character. He remembered convincing himself that kindness made people weak. And now at the end, he wondered when exactly he had decided that control mattered more than care. The pain in his chest sharpened. He closed his eyes, trying to breathe through it. In the quiet, memories came uninvited. The sound of tools hitting the ground. The silence after a mistake. The way children learned to move without being noticed. The way they stopped asking questions. And then, slowly, another realization surfaced. None of them had come back for revenge. They had come to look, to see what became of him. And what they had found was not a monster standing tall. It was a small, frail man alone in a large house, afraid of his own reflection. A strange sound escaped his throat. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a sob. Even he did not know. His vision blurred. The room darkened at the edges. His hand slipped from the armrest and fell uselessly into his lap. As the pain deepened, something inside him finally gave way. Not his body, his certainty. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to be powerless. Not the kind of powerlessness that comes from fear, but the kind that comes from time, from consequence, from having no one left who owes you anything. His breathing slowed. The house remained silent. No footsteps came running. No voices called his name. No one waited for instructions. No one needed him. And in that final moment, as the light shifted and the world narrowed, he understood the truth he had spent his life avoiding. You can take years from others. You can take strength. You can take obedience. You can take silence. But time takes everything back. Slowly, quietly, without mercy. And when it does, there is no one left to stop it. The chair creaked softly as his body grew still. Outside, the day continued. The house stood. The world moved on, and the man who once believed he owned other lives was finally claimed by the one thing he could never control. Time. Time takes everything, especially pride. If this story stayed with you, then you already understand why it mattered. Subscribe. Here every story ends with consequences.